Let's jump in.
Yeah, no, let's jump in. Let's start with some of the things, David, you and I have learned in the last all the customer meetings that we've had, all the conversations we've had, and obviously with our experience, you take away a lot from these meetings. And I think one of the goals of this podcast that David and I had was not to always focus on what's out there and talk about technology constantly, because I think there's a number of other podcasts out there that do a great job of that, and I don't want to kind of rehash everything. But I think where we had the little our spin on it is that deep business experience in doing the implementation work and understanding how you really apply this technology to complex business problems. So I'd like to, kind of focus on, I think, on that a lot more because it really, I think there's a lot of people out there need to understand, or this would help them understand how to actually apply this tech.
Yeah,
But
hopefully that's useful to people. I think it's been really interesting for us to learn as we've been working in this field for a long time.
mm,
So let's tee up this conversation about barriers to implementation. And I think the way I think about this is one of the beautiful things about the new crop of AI tools, generative AI tools
yeah,
especially, is that they are very easy to get started with. And in fact,
right.
if we're talking about Gen AI, as long as you can type and have access to a web browser, you can kind of get started playing with them. And the tools are
Mhm.
being increasingly integrated and built into the tools that you use every day. So if you are a Microsoft user, you might have access to
Right,
Microsoft Copilot. If you're a Google Workspace user, you may have access to Gemini,
right,
or you could have downloaded the applications or running on web, whether it's OpenAI's models or using Perplexity or using Claude from Anthropic. So getting started isn't the problem. But I think the problem or the challenge comes when you want to do more than just use it as an ad hoc tool for personal productivity. How do you
right,
actually create a system? So, Peter, like, you want to
right.
start this? Like, what are some of the challenges that people have when they want to make a real application or real system out of this technology?
Well, I think when you sit down as a business user and you look at the problem, very often you approach it, well, there's generative AI, there's large language models that will solve my issue. What they don't realize, or when they're not thinking about it, is that if you have a complex business problem that requires many, many steps and, pulling in information from a whole bunch of different sources of information, maybe you're cruising the web, maybe you have API calls you're making, whatever it is that you're doing, as a human, you're thinking through a problem, you're coming up with a series of steps that you follow to get to a conclusion or get to an answer. And most business problems require reasoning. It's not just the generation of text or images or whatever. Now, generative AI is fantastic at generating text, generating content based on a prompt. And a lot of the tools out there do a phenomenal job at doing that, whether it's generating code or generating content, based on your prompts or your prompt engineering. But they don't reason. They don't think through problems. They're not doing that for you. You see a lot of companies approach it again because the technology, I think, is moving. And we've been at this from the very beginning, and our conversations have changed dramatically from our first conversations to the conversations we're having now. And
Yeah.
we're seeing, business users get certainly more sophisticated about what they want to do, but how to do it is still, I think, there's a level of complexity there. Um, I am definitely seeing the kinds of problems, and I know I'm jumping around over here, get more difficult for traditional regular language models and really require, I think, a much more sophisticated approach to solving these problems.
Okay,
Um,
so we'll park that as the foreshadowing for our conversation next
right.
about large reasoning models or language reasoning models. But what you were saying about sort of breaking down the problem into steps is really interesting because I think, like any technology, you as a user have to understand, at least at a basic level, how you would solve the problem. You can automate some of the work in solving it. So a large language model is fantastic for automating the process of reading through and picking out key points from lots of documents, for example.
Right.
But if you don't know at a fundamental level how you'll solve the problem, you're not necessarily going to get the kind of results you want from a model. And
Correct.
Let's talk then. Maybe the
Let's.
beginning of this is let's talk about this concept of prompt engineering, because which is sort of an absurd term, because it really just means asking a more precise question or issuing a more precise instruction to a model. But I think to some degree, creating the right instruction that specifies what you want done and how you want it done and what kind of results you want back is maybe the first step that you have to take in getting the results you want.